The decade of the 1940s began with the start of World War II, triggered by an attack on Pearl Harbor. The war ended with the dawn of the nuclear age. In 1947, Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier. A year later, a group of people with vision at Seton Hall decided to join the cutting edge of broadcast technology by establishing FM radio station WSOU. Seton Hall student Tom Parnham would become the station's first chief engineer. He recalls when the station first went on the air.
My senior and Kihuli and I were standing in the control room by the transmitter, which had not yet been tested, and I said, I don't think we're going to make it by next Wednesday. And he looked out the control room window. We had windows then, you know, and turned to me with a big smile, hands clasped, and he said, we'll make it. And I don't know what he saw out the window, but we did make it.
WSOU now may consider itself officially open.
This broadcast by station WSOU this evening is the result of the efforts and the kindness of many people.
There's no beating Seton Hall. Now they have their FM station, it will top them all.
At the start of the 1950s, the United States was the most powerful nation in the world. Life reflected the conservative Eisenhower years. WSOU's programming consisted of middle-of-the-road and classical music, ethnic programming, news, and radio drama.
The ship sank, but in that moment, a miracle of self-sacrificing love converted her slippery deck.
The Bob Higgins and Frank Kiernan Show. Let's listen in as they work on the delicate mechanism.
Boy, another television set repaired.
Well, that's wonderful, Frank, but there's only one catch.
What's that?
That was a washing machine we brought in.
Hi, good afternoon. It's 3 p.m. and time for another edition of Record Varieties.
Well, here's the director of the Irish Academy, Miss Rita Murphy.
Good evening. Tonight's topic is Blarney.
Labavakara. Good evening to you in Lithuanian.
Programma in lingua italiana che vi viene offerto ogni lunedì.
Hi, cousin Stan Kozakowski here with your favorite Happy Monday Night Polka Party.
Across the footlights.
The 1950s would give us 3D movies, the hula hoop, the Beat Generation, and the emergence of television. But perhaps the most impactful sociological influence of the decade was the emergence of a new form of music called rock and roll.
Hail, hail, rock and roll.
But it was banned on WSOU and wouldn't be played on the station till the middle 1960s. In the 1960s, life began to speed up at WSOU as the broadcast day was lengthened and a variety of new programs were developed.
WSOU now takes pleasure in presenting another in the award-winning series, Do You Know? Here is our producer and moderator, Ethel L.A. Believe.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
For the distinguished sound in college radio and college folk music, a truly enlightening experience.
And a good Friday evening. This is Bob Considine inviting you to join us now for the next 90 minutes on the sounds of folk music.
Good afternoon, boys and girls, and welcome to Tiny Tot Time.
Good evening and welcome to International Concert Hall. This is your host, Alfred D'Alessio.
Again, looking at New Jersey, Johnson has 1,331,555.
From the WSOU newsroom and the wires of United Press International, here is the 4 o'clock edition of news.
The rock and roll generation was now comprised of the post-war baby boomers. America had its youngest president to date, who became the first of 3 assassination victims of the tumultuous decade. It became the age of hippies, turning on and dropping out, psychedelic drugs, free love, the Vietnam War, man in space, protest marches, rioting in the streets, and Woodstock. And on WSOU, there were new features heard, like montage, news documentaries, and the 5 o'clock report.
This is the new WSOU in South Orange, New Jersey.
Possible Fortis impeachment. Good evening. I'm Frederick Simmons, and this is the 5 o'clock report. The program Organ Masterworks.
By early Saturday morning, the new grim figures were known. During the night, 7 more people were slain by the deadly shooting.
And today, the National Guard were out for approximately an hour and a half.
He was really in an upset condition, as you can hear from this tape that I recorded.
Somebody, they shot my son, and I want it all over the world.
rock and roll finally hit WSOU in the mid-60s. A program called The Time Machine featuring R&B aired briefly for one semester. It was hosted by Joe Rostel.
This is The Time Machine over WSOU Radio.
This was followed by two sustaining rock and roll shows. One called The Relic Rock Review. It featured oldies and was hosted by Richie Lawns.
So here's your golden oldie straight from the Relic Rock.
Yeah, we'll be swinging until the hour of 7 o'clock. We got lots of gold for you tonight.
The first show to ever play current rock music along with cutting-edge new releases, a forerunner of today's WSOU, was a program called Discotheque Discoveries and was hosted by Bill Rock.
This question I asked the Beatles at their press conference on Monday night in the Warwick Hotel.
It's been said that Lennon and McCartney may someday replace the names Rodgers and Hammerstein. Have you ever considered discontinuing performing and instead just keep on writing?
When we're 80, we won't be performing, we may be writing. And we don't want to be Rodgers and Hars, are we?
In the 1970s, WSOU began to reach out with more remote broadcasts.
At 9:30 a.m. Saturday morning, Jerry Klein and myself are on the grass expanse extending from the Washington Monument all the way back to the Capitol, where the people are assembling to begin the march down Pennsylvania Avenue.
A short history of Father Fay is John O'Hara. John?
Thank you, Jerry.
Santa Monica High School Gymnasium in Santa Monica, California. It's the Seton Hall Pirates and the waves of Pepperdine University. Good evening, everyone. This is Bob Picozzi, along with Tom Monaghan and technical supervisor Harold Winard, and welcome to the beautiful Santa Monica, California.
The 1970s produced the Watergate scandal, which resulted in President Nixon's resigning and Gerald Ford taking his place. Later in the decade, former peanut farmer Jimmy Carter would inhabit the White House, only to exit with a little help from the Iranian hostage crisis.
89.5 FM, Joe Caraselli with you.
WSOU! WSOU!
WSOU once again expanded its broadcast day by signing on in the morning.
Start your day's morning with bacon and eggs.
In the 1970s, rock music began to evolve into a new form called New Wave. In 1979, WSOU made worldwide headlines for banning Billy Joel's Only the Good Die Young, as the university found its lyrics to be a mockery.
Catholic girls start much too late. Talk of the town.
The 1980s began on an uplifting note with the launch of the first space shuttle, Columbia. Ronald Reagan would become America's 40th president, and music became the driving force of WSOU's programming.
89.5 FM, Seton Hall University Radio. Serving the northern New Jersey area for over 37 years, we are WSOU South Orange.
In the 1980s, WSOU would go through perhaps its most revolutionary change.
In the 80s, we had more and more music on the air. But you have to know that it's a student-operated station. It is music that they like, they want to hear.
In 1986, the station found an underserved, youth-oriented market and decided to formatically become a heavy metal station, a move initially not supported by the university. It would eventually become known as pirate radio.
Only thing hot is the smell of my feet.
We came up with the idea of pirate radio because pirate radio is something kind of outlaw, but to the university it would sound like we had great school spirit.
If you guys show support for this format right now, we could do this all the time.
Anything from Metallica, Bon Jovi, Iron Maiden,
Pantera, Sepultura, Alice in Chains.
It was an excuse for them to try to pull the plug on the radio station.
With this, the university chose to ban metal music from the station.
Negotiations with the university had gone well, and the metal ban was lifted.
The 90s began with the first live war telecast involving a coalition of countries that invaded Iraq called Desert Storm, initiated by President George H.W. Bush. He was succeeded by the first Democratic president to be elected to 2 terms since FDR, who later in the decade would be impeached. The music continued to be the focus of the 90s. WSOU began receiving gold records and on a yearly basis won awards from College Media Journal, or CMJ, for Metal Station of the Year. But once again, there were big changes in store for WSOU. Just as the campus of Seton Hall University was changing and being updated, a brand new state-of-the-art facility was being designed and built to replace the old location. Metal continued as the dominant sound on WSOU. Bands like Korn and Machine Head were just starting. Deftones and Tool were becoming popular as well.
Now let's get back to the music with some Tool from the Opiate album, This Is Opiate.
WSOU's off-site event participation also included Ozfest, where fans showed their love for WSOU. And it was the 90s where the SSSOU cruises began. The new millennium began with an attack on America that came 60 years after Pearl Harbor and became known as 9/11. George W. Bush was president. He was followed by America's first African-American president, Barack Obama, and America experienced its greatest economic downturn since the Great Depression. In the 2000s, WSOU took full advantage of the internet explosion. It both promoted and streamed on the internet. WSOU won Station of the Year twice, and it began broadcasting in HD.
I'm Erin, here to play you the loudest rock in New Jersey. So how about you get those requests in? I'm here all night playing everything you want to hear.
Metal continued to reign at WSOU. With more concerts and cruises becoming a part of its makeup, the station continues to flourish with activities off-site as well as within WSOU's studios on the campus of Seton Hall University. A lot has happened at WSOU over the past 65 years. As for all of the changes and highlights throughout its existence, perhaps the late Tom Parnham summed it up best.
I know I've been asked recently, what did I consider the highlight of all the years? And I think that's difficult to answer because as we did one new thing after another, it for the moment was the highlight of the time.